Good morning, everyone. It's so good to be with you and see you. Please join me in a spirit of quiet or prayer in whatever way feels most right for you. God of abundant love, we are grateful for your loving presence here with us today and every day. We know that through spending time with you, we realize how wide and long and high and deep your love is for us. Let that abundant love shine through us as we listen to this meditation with open hearts and ears. Amen. Today is the second Sunday in the season of Lent. Lent, for me, is a sacred time to slow down and intentionally draw nearer to God. Lent is about finding ways to quiet all the noise in our surroundings, in our nation, and in the world, so that we can hear the still, small voice of God. This year, our theme for Lent is abundant love. Therefore, Lent this year is a time to remember, to experience, and to share the abundant love God has for each of us. You all did great sharing God's abundant love last week with all of your acts of service. In today's text, Jesus is tested in the wilderness. So, why the wilderness? Wilderness is a dark, scary, lonely, uncomfortable place that we often avoid at all costs. For some, it's more of a desert, like dry and barren, typically desolate, waterless, and without vegetation. But it doesn't always have to be a place where it's scary and dark. It can be both and, because it's also a place where, as Barbara Brown Taylor would say, some things can only be learned in the dark. And I was reminded this week of a plaque that's in the chapel at the Redemptorist Renewal Center in Tucson, Arizona. And the quote is, "The desert will lead you to your heart, where I will speak." So in our text this morning, the first test that Jesus has is to turn stone to bread, to use his power to meet his own physical needs, hunger, to use his power for his own individual gain or comfort. And Jesus answers, one does not live by bread alone. We all have more needs than hunger, both individually and communally. And Jesus' life and ministry was not about individual personal pursuits. It was and still is about abundant love, connecting with the ever-present abundant love of God, as well as showing and being that abundant love to and for one another. In the second test, Jesus is tested to be given authority and power and control over kingdoms or an empire. He used his power and authority to possibly gain earthly kingdoms and an empire, and to give his worship and allegiance to the devil instead of God. And Jesus answers, worship the Lord your God and serve only him. He was being asked to worship and follow something or someone other than God. And Jesus' life and ministry was about worshiping God and following God's lead, and living, loving, and modeling the ways of God's abundant love, which was contrary to the ways of the rest of the world and the empire in which he lived in treated people. Test number 3 was to test God to prove his protection, or to use his power to test or manipulate God rather than serving God. And Jesus answered, "Do not put the Lord God to the test." So, what does this experience of Jesus being tested in the wilderness have to do with our theme, abundant love? The way I see it, in each of these tests, we can tell what the test was really about by the answers that Jesus gives. Yet all of these are spiritual tests too, testing Jesus' faithfulness. Was Jesus going to live the way the world wanted and expected him to, following the world or the empire's standards or wishes? Or was Jesus going to remain faithful to God, God's plan for him and all of us, and God's plan for abundant love for all? Jesus chose to remain faithful to God and God's abundant love, knowing that we as humans cannot live by bread alone. There are a lot of other needs we have besides bread. But most of all, we need to be fed spiritually so that we are spiritually grounded in God, who is abundant love. This way we can follow the way Jesus lived and spread abundant love wherever we go. Jesus chose to remain faithful to God and God's abundant love by worshiping and serving God, and by leaning on and living into God's understanding of how to live in the world, working for and bringing healing and wholeness, welcome, mercy, justice, equity, freedom, liberation, and abundant love to all. Jesus chose to remain faithful to God and God's abundant love by trusting God, by choosing to keep a servant's heart, and by not willing to test or manipulate God for his own purposes. In some ways, this was a spiritual reckoning. In Jesus choosing to remain faithful to God, in essence, Jesus was saying, it's not about me and my personal gain. It's about God and about God's abundant love for all of us. It is quite interesting to read and reflect on this passage and the ways in which it sounds eerily familiar to our present day circumstances in this nation. Think about the ways in which our faithfulness is being tested right now. What are we going to hold on to? Hope, love, and God, who is abundant love? Or fear, hate, power, greed, and personal gain? Or as Diana Butler Bass would put it, those things now being carried out by a leader who has placed his power and ambition above God's own words of provision, community, and humility. Valerie Kaur from the Revolutionary Love Project says this about our present day circumstances. The future is dark, or may look dark right now. But what if this is not the darkness of the tomb, but the darkness of the womb? Yet for me, one darkness that she's talking about was not better than the other. The darkness of the tomb leads to resurrection, and the darkness of the womb leads to the birth of new life. I think if we're going to get through this time of darkness and get through to resurrection and or the birth of a new and more abundant life, we need to armor up with abundant love and then practice giving and sharing that abundant love wherever we go. Colossians 3:12 says, "So, chosen by God for this new life of love, dress in the wardrobe God picked out for you: compassion, kindness, humility, quiet strength, discipline. Be even tempered, content with second place, quick to forgive an offense. Forgive as quickly and completely as Jesus forgave you. And regardless of what else you put on, wear love. It's your basic, all purpose garment. Never be without it. So, how do we armor up, put on, or cultivate this abundant love? Yesterday at the spiritual retreat, we talked about 4 ways that you can cultivate abundant love. First, sometimes to be able to experience abundant love and therefore to be able to spread it around for others, we have we have to find some ways to release guilt, shame, and pain. Second, it is important to be spiritually grounded in abundant love, or our tank filled up with abundant love, before we can give it or let it flow through us to others. And we fill up the tank by receiving abundant love. The receiving can be in a variety of ways, a few of which are through meditating or visualizing the receiving, or being filled, you're visualizing the being filled up with abundant love. Yesterday, we took 2.5 minutes to listen to the song, You Are So Beautiful, as if God were singing it directly to and over us. We just sat for a few minutes and let the song wash over us. And that few minutes filled our tanks yesterday of abundant love from God. Third, we can cultivate abundant love by being intentional and creative about ways to give it or share it. It doesn't have to be something big or difficult, especially in this current climate. Small things can go a long way in spreading abundant love wherever we go. It can be as simple as smiling at and greeting people that you encounter every day, and or asking them how they're doing. It's amazing how we don't ask people that much anymore. We might like in this community setting, but if we're at the grocery store, we don't actually ask the cashier or the people we encounter how they're actually doing, or thanking them for the work that they do. Or what you can do to help the people around you feel seen, heard, and valued for exactly who they are. That might just take truly listening to someone, or using the correct pronouns when talking to or about a person, or calling someone that comes to mind to check in and see how they are doing, or making plans to spend time with someone who you know is lonely or doesn't get out of the house much. Yesterday, we practiced giving abundant love by bringing a particular problem or person that we were having difficulty with to mind, and holding that person or problem in our minds while meditating via song on what would love do. Whenever I have hurt in my heart, I ask, what would love do? Whenever I don't know what to say, I ask, what would love do? What would love do? When I have something hard to say, I ask, what would love do? When it seems another block is in my way, I ask, what would love do? When it seems I can't face another day, I ask, what would love do? What would love do? Love has all the answers. Love makes no demands. Love will lead me to the truth and help me to understand that life is all about love. In any situation, I ask, what would love do? Fourth, a practice of gratitude is a good way to cultivate abundant love. Gratitude is a way that we can give abundant love back to God and a way to shift our perspective towards self and others. The more we are in a state of gratitude, the easier it is to see and recognize abundant love when it's present. Because our focus is on what is going right and where we see love and blessings in our life. Practicing gratitude helps us live in the present moment where we are better able to recognize abundant love when it shows up, and is a way to find love and belonging within ourselves and with one another and reciprocally with the divine. My friend Carrie has been meditating on the words of Jesus on the cross, "Forgive them, for they know not what they do," in order to have love and compassion for folks who voted differently than her. Many folks are realizing that what they believed and who they trusted turned out to be not what they thought. But I think we have all beliefs in something strongly, and it turned out not to be true. But folks are waking up to a new understanding of the lies they bought into and feeling great remorse. These folks, too, will need our compassion and abundant love. So she is cultivating abundant love so that she will have some to give. In our text this morning, Jesus remained faithful to God and in turn allowed God's abundant life to flow through him to others in a way that has impacted people for generations. I believe that we too have the opportunity in this current climate to be faithful to God by cultivating abundant love in our lives and letting it flow, overflow through us to others in ways that can change the world and have a ripple effect that can last for years to come. Let us go be abundant love, for the world needs us. Thank you.